Good evening, students. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing good. We are going to start today. We're going to start with a new chapter concerning literature. We are going to speak about American literature, the early American literature, of course. In other words, it is about the colonial period, but we are going to concentrate or focus on the Puritan literature. So, American literature in general is anything which was written or oral, um, of course, elaborated in English in the USA. Generally, literature depends on essential language and history which have been influenced by the country and uh, the social conditions of that time. This is about literature. So anything that happened during the colonial period in America, which means in the beginning of the 17th century until now, uh, it was or it is concerned with the American literature. Anything which was written in that period, it is considered to be American literature. But we can say that it was not, so to speak, American literature, especially during the colonial period, because people at that time, they were not independent there. They were colonists. They were colonies which were linked to the British government and the British crown. So yes, it can be considered as American literature, but still, it is, so to speak, we should say it is, so to speak, American. It was not, so to speak, American literature because they still wrought with the American style, sorry, the British style, and they left a huge trace about the British style of writing. So, although it is considered to be American, but you should know that it was not really American because people at that time, before independence, they did not think of themselves for being Americans. So, with that being said, of course, the colonial period stretches, sorry, from 1607 with the establishment of the first colony in America, Jamestown in Virginia, until the beginning of the Revolution. That was called the colonial period. Anyway, we should start with Puritans, since we are dealing with Puritan literature during the colonial period. Who are these Puritans? Then we are going to speak about the characteristics of Puritan literature. Then we are going to speak about some famous writers of Puritan literature, but we are going to speak about those who were not Puritan, those who dealt with the secularity in general, and we call them also chroniclers, those who write chronicles, um, which means journals, diaries, etc. So we shall start with the Puritans. And the Puritans, or Puritanism, is a trendy of Protestantism. You should know that after the appearance of Protestantism, after the Reformation in Europe, many religions appeared or they broke off from Catholicism. And among these religions is Puritanism. And the Puritans are separatists, therefore, they wanted to purify the English church, which was Anglican. So, separatists, they wanted to be separated from the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, but Puritans wanted to purify the Anglican Church. So the deal is, after the Reformation, England, the religion in England changed, it became Anglican, which means the Church of England became purely English. After the Reformation, of course. Now, the Puritans who used to live in England, they thought that, or they believed that the Anglican Church was too Catholic, and so they wanted to purify it. But there was one problem: they were persecuted by the Anglican churchmen. The Anglican churchmen did not like the fact that the Puritans were living in England and they were trying to spread their ideas, their Puritan ideas. Um, but of course, they were persecuted, so there was a kind of conflict between the Anglicans and the Puritans. So these Puritans left England, they fled England more precisely, and they went to Holland, where they called themselves pilgrims. So they wanted to go to the New World because they got the news about the fact that there are expeditions from England to the New World. So they wanted to go there in order to, let's say, to enjoy religious freedom, economic freedom, and many other freedoms, of course. Um, they went to Holland, of course. They fled England. They went to Holland, and they called themselves pilgrims. And from Holland, they wanted to go to America. And they took a ship. They called that ship the Mayflower, and they wanted to join the first colony, which was established in 1607 in Virginia by Captain John Smith. This first colony is called Jamestown, and of course it is situated in the south, eastern coast, of course, among the 13 colonies. But there was one problem in the ocean because, at the time there was no plane, so they had to travel by ship, and ship, or let's say the trip from Holland to the New World takes, for example, months. So they stay in the ocean for a long time, and the ocean is not always calm. Sometimes there are storms, tempests. So there was a tempest. So instead of landing in the south, they were drifted from their current path, and they landed in the north. And since they were so religious, they felt like they believed that it was destiny, it was God who wanted them to go to the north instead of going to the south. One more thing about the Puritans is the fact that these Puritans were like, they were extremists in terms of religion. They did not like entertainment. In other words, they did not like drinking, dancing, music, going to the theater, or whatsoever. So everything for them, everything that was important is to worship God, and that's it. This is the Puritanism. So since they were so religious, they thought it was just destiny. God wanted them to go to the north instead of going to the south. So they settled in the north since it was destiny to them, and they settled in a place called Plymouth Bay, and it was in 1620. So, anyways, their literature. So this is a quick or a general overview about the Puritans. How did they go to America? How did they manage to get there? And their literature. Now we are going to speak about literature. So their literature is concerned with philosophy of life, the preeminence of the individual and the freedom of the individual, and the value of learning and education. So the Puritans, although they were, let's say, extremists in terms of religion, but they gave some importance. They gave a lot of importance in terms of education, learning, and humanism. Yeah, humanism. That was the era of the Renaissance and the a lot of discoveries. So people started giving importance to a human being as an individual rather than a whole. Now we move to the characteristics of Puritan literature. They used the Bible to give instructions. For example, they took some laws, some, let's say, they took pieces of advice from the Bible, and they used them in order to show people how to live their life. The second characteristic is the fact that many of their writings are journals, diaries, and daily experiences, and they often used the first person point of view. So they have always included themselves in their stories, in their, let's say, experiences, daily experiences. They used the first person point of view. And the third characteristic would be the religious writings rather than entertaining. Like I said, the Puritans were so extremist that they did not love things like dancing, going to the theater, drinking, and many other things that entertain a human being. So everything for them was related to religion. Therefore, we say that even their writings is related to religion. So we have many genres, the types of literature. We have like sermons, poems, or poems, and letters, etc. The fifth characteristic would be the fact that Puritans lived a simple life. They were humble people, and therefore even their writings were or had a simple style as well, in order to reach even the uneducated people. They often made references from the Bible, like events that have happened to prophets, for example, and they even took names of the characters of the Bible and they used them in their writings in order to show people the importance of religion and so on and so forth. It was also the last characteristic. It was the fact that it was also based on fear. They have, um, or they often show fear in their writings in order to sensitize people. They have, let's say, they have also brought up the topic of God and hell, for example, in order to show people that they need to do good and worship God in their lives, you know, in order to get to heaven, for example. Now, some famous writers of the Puritan literature. We have Anne Bradstreet. She was one of the first American poets, and she provided an insight of both Puritan faith and the struggle of women at that time, because women at that time were really struggling. So this poet here, Anne Bradstreet, she didn't only speak about, or she didn't only show the faith or the Puritan faith, but she has also spoken about the conditions of or the struggles of women of that time. And of course, her poems are believed to be written in a charming simplicity in order to reach the uneducated people, which is one of the characteristics of the Puritan literature. And she also focused on Puritan ideals and way of life. Another writer, a famous writer, is William Bradford, who was the governor of Plymouth Bay, and he was one of those who signed the Mayflower Compact, and the Mayflower Compact was written in the ocean when the Pilgrims or the Puritans who came from Holland to the New World, to America, they have written a small book in which they made their laws, small laws, which they had to respect later on. It was like a small constitution, which is called the Mayflower Compact. And compact here means an agreement. So William Bradford spoke about the journey of the Pilgrims and the struggle of settling and establishing a colony. Because do not forget that once they got there, there was the Native Americans or the Indians. So there were a lot of battles between the colonists and the Native Americans. As well, he described the difficult relationships between the Puritans and these natives, and he or his writings were presented in a clear way of writing that we call a plain style to be understood in order to be understood by uneducated readers. Like I said, they all followed the same characteristic, which is to present their writings in a clear way in order to reach out the or the uneducated people. Another writer, famous writer, is John Winthrop. He was the first governor of Massachusetts Bay Company or Bay Colony. He he was one of the most important uh, Puritans who or most important founders of New England. Uh, and yeah, he was well educated. He was very religious, and he had great leadership skills, and he was very wise, according to historians, of course. So, the three writers that you need to remember is Anne Bradstreet, William Bradford, and John Winthrop, and of course there are many others who contributed to the development of the American literature. And now, of course, some writers of the colonial period as well, but they were secular, they were not Puritans, mainly adventurers. And the first one to remember, who is very important, is Captain John Smith. Captain John Smith is the first captain, is the first person who led the first expedition to America and he was an English adventurer. He was an explorer. He was a pioneer, and he exploited the New World as well. He founded Jamestown in 1607, like I said, and he wrote the General History of Virginia, the Summer Isles, in 1624. And of course, some other writers like Daniel Danton, who wrote Broad Description of New York, William Pence, who wrote a brief account of the province of Pennsylvania, and Thomas Ashe's colonial or Thomas Ashe, who wrote the Colonial. So this is about the colonial literature in terms or focused on the Puritan literature. We have spoken about the characteristics. Who are the Puritans? Now you know about the Puritanism, why that literature had that kind of characteristics, because it was based mainly on the way of their lives. Since they were simple in life, they were humble, so even their writings are simple and humble. They were so religious, even their writings were religious. They wrote sermons, a lot of things related to religion. So, um, please leave a like for my Facebook page, and I hope I made this clear for you. Share with your friends, exams and so on. And if you have questions or anything, please contact the Facebook page of this YouTube channel. As soon as I see the message, I'll try to answer. Otherwise, I tell you, see you next video. Peace.